Okay, welcome everyone to today's AU eRequesting TDG meeting. We've got a jam-packed day as usual for this. Just looking at the agenda, we've got our usual agenda where we go through usual business and a number of updates. And then we've got a couple of proposals that we didn't get through in the last couple of meetings. We've got the CommunicationRequest Feature Proposal, as well as the AU eRequesting Task Business Status Proposal. Those were sent out probably over the last few weeks. We just haven't got to them in previous meetings. So we'll go through those today, try and get some decisions on those. Then we thought it's a good opportunity now, given we've made a lot of decisions this year, made a lot of good progress, that actually do a bit of a walkthrough of the Fire IG of how it looks now with the changes we've got in there. So we've got a connectathon coming up next week as well. So it's a good opportunity to sort of take stock, see where we're at, what's in there, and have a sort of walkthrough of the IG. So that's the plan for today. As part of our usual business, we will look to approve the minutes of the previous meeting on the 27th of February. So I will jump to that. So I'll put it in the chat too. So these are the minutes that were distributed for review last week. We've got the recording, we've got all the decisions made, the key discussion points in here, and all of that has been there, and no one has made any comments on it. Does anyone need any more time to review this or have any issues with the minutes? And if not, does someone want to propose or make a motion to accept these minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept these minutes.
Thanks, Jamie. Does someone want a second?
Happy to second, Michael.
Thanks, Jamie. All right, I will launch a poll for the approval of these minutes as soon as I find it. Minutes. Okay. You should now see a poll for the approval of the minutes. If you didn't attend the meeting, you can abstain. Otherwise, please vote. I think we have the majority of votes there. I'll just give it 3, 2, 1. So I'll end the poll there, share the results. So we have 15 plus 1 in the chat. So that's 16 affirmative. We have 0 negative, and we have 6 abstain. So that motion is passed. Thanks, everyone. Jumping back to our slides. So action items from previous meetings. The first one there is about the proposal on task.business status. So we're going to go through that today. So we will run through that one today. The CDG and TDG principles for inclusion criteria on maybe in scope items, that's still in progress, still with the setup of the harmonization group between the CDG and TDG. So that's still in progress. There's no further updates on that at this stage. Jai, I think you're on the call. Do we have any updates on the next 2 action items?
Yep. So in terms of related person, I've had some chats internally, and there's certainly an appetite to explore what that could look like. So I think there's some more work that needs to happen now that the share by default legislation has been passed and what components need to come into the rules. But certainly from, I guess, a starting point and in a, like I said, non-mandatory way, it would be good to start to collect related person in relation to the withdrawal of consent. So happy to have a chat out of session around what a proposal might look like, and we can come to the next meeting about that if you'd like.
Yep. Okay, that sounds good.
In terms of the URI,
yep.
just trying to work through understanding what the legislative changes mean to what the appropriate reference is for that. So I think there's a couple of tweaks in the legislation. So hoping to get some confirmation the next week around that.
Okay. I think we have put in into the IG, we have put in the new profile for the My Health Record consent withdrawal. We just left off the URI, so that URI is currently blank until such time that we've got that to put in, but we can do that.
No worries.
And then I think I just saw Angus drop in. So Angus, do you have any updates on the last one there about copy 2? Or Rosemary as well, if Rosemary's on the call.
So I couldn't recall exactly what we wanted to capture on our copy 2s though. Copy 2s are certainly documented and added on at point of request. I don't recall what we were trying to find out about copy 2s.
Patient, I think.
Maybe I get myself off mute.
Mhm.
I wonder why no one's listening to me. I seem to remember it was the topic of copy to patient.
Yes.
So, which, is that still a thing? How do we like copy to doctors? I agree. Like we do it, and we try and find the doctor, and we send a copy of the report to the doctor, and really no questions asked, right? But
Yep.
copy to patient, I wasn't so clear. I remember from a couple of decades ago happening, but I wasn't sure if it's still a thing today, especially with My Health Record now. I know Sonic's far less inclined because of My Health Record. We're like, using My Health Record.
Yeah, no, it certainly is happening in our world, definitely.
Yeah.
And also for those that opt out of My Health Record, unfortunately, too.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So certainly I think we need to make sure we cover.
Yeah. So Michael, I thought the question here was not so much the vanilla copy to, it was more about copy to patient. I don't think we've covered really copy to patient.
Yeah, I think that might be something we can do as part of the review when we're going through it. I think we've made some modeling assumptions at the moment on that, and can then look at whether that's appropriate for the broad scenarios that may include patient. Because I actually thought we did model that they could be the patient, could be a copy too. I think that's the way we actually modeled it. That it could be a practitioner or a patient. So we can actually, I do have it. We might as well look at it while we're here.
Yeah, I'm trying to jump there as you talk.
Yeah, it's definitely there.
It is.
So if we have a look at profiles and then, I've got a diagram here now. So the copy to the recipient can be practitioner role or patient.
Okay.
So that is the way we modeled it. So I think we're looking for that flexibility.
Okay.
Michael, I'm just going to reiterate, sorry. I think as a practitioner, although, copy to patient is going to be very important. I mean, we still have a large population that either won't use My Health Records or will use My Health Records, but not routinely, and so on and so forth. And if we're planning to digitalize it, they have to have the option of what else can they do in circumstances. So just reiterating that as a clinician, I don't care if they use My Health Records or not. I just want to treat them with the same efficiency.
And also many pathology providers will have a patient portal. So I'm assuming the same sort of rules need to apply there.
Not to patients, but well, not many. I wouldn't say many. We don't have a patient portal.
Not within Australia. Yes, you're quite right. No, you're quite right. But certainly in America and in other countries, that is the way everyone is going towards, and I'm sure it won't be far before we comes to us, right? So we should really have it as part of our standards.
And that's primarily through their equivalent Spark project. They all have Apple iPhone integration now. Yeah, exactly
right. That's right. So I don't think we should be parking it. That's for sure.
Yeah, but I also agree, Yanni. Like we still need a paper fallback.
Okay. Angus, Rosemary, you happy if we close that action item then? I think that unless you find something you want to bring back on the way that we've modeled it, that's not going to work, or find some things in the way your businesses operate that might need further consideration, that you just bring that back at a later time when it comes up.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree also.
Okay. Thanks. So we'll close that action item. Now some updates. So we do have next week, we've got the Trans-Tasman Symposium and HL7 Australia Fire Workgroup meetings and the Connectathon. So all happening next week in Sydney from Tuesday. Now on Tuesday is the Fire Workgroup meeting days. So that's a whole day of Fire Workgroup meetings that's happening in parallel to the symposium. So we've got one of those sessions allocated for a eRequesting TDG meeting. So we'll be running a normal eRequesting TDG for a 1.5 hour session from 3:30 to 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time on that Tuesday. And we are going to run it as a hybrid session. So it's an in-person event, but it's operating inside the Microsoft building. So we will actually run Microsoft Teams meeting for that to run it as a hybrid event as well. So all of the TDG members should have received an invite to that meeting, noting it is Teams, it's not Zoom. So it will be slightly different to the way we normally do it. This link here goes to the agenda minutes, which has the link details over there on the right. I'll put this in the chat for everyone. So over here on the right is actually the Teams meeting link. The agenda for the day is primarily we're going to use it as an opportunity to discuss service request groups. So we've currently done task groups, and we have discussed the previous connectathons around some options for service request groups. So I think we want to use this opportunity with having some people face to face, but everyone online as well, to flesh out the requirements and the need, if we need it, for a service request group, in addition to the task group that we've already done. So that'll be a fairly open discussion. We don't have a firm proposal that we're bringing to that. It's kind of a discussion to work out what we need and work out where we move forward with that. Another thing we might try and get it go through on that day, be time permitting though, is also the next feature prioritization for R1. So we've been through quite a few features earlier this year. It's now looking at what's the next set of features that we think we want to look at, given the time we've got left before we go to ballot in August. What's a priority to the TDG to look at next? So they're the things we're going to look at. Like I said, here's the meeting invite details over here to join in if you're remote. And hopefully it should be in your calendar as well as a TDG member that was sent out. So it would definitely be a worthwhile one to be involved in, given we'll have some open discussion about that service request groups. There's also currently an expression of interest out at the moment for a Sparked testing event. So we ran a number of these last year through Sparked for AU Core, and that was sort of 1 day dedicated testing events to give people an opportunity to sort of get the dedication of the Spark team to help you with testing, for working through the specification, understanding what problems we might have with the specifications, helping to raise issues, helping to test your system. So this is slightly different to a connectathon, but a similar theme where it's hands-on testing, but it's a dedicated Spark event. And we're looking at what interest there is out there in the community to run another one of these towards the middle of this year. Potentially a combined event with AU Core, patient summary, and eRequesting, getting vendors and the like together in one place where we can test the specification, test your systems, and work through the implementation of the specification. So that expression of interest is out at the moment, trying to work out what the interest is, where you'd be interested in holding it, what dates, all of those sorts of things. So if you've got interest, please scan that QR code, complete the AOI, and we'll provide further updates once that's closed about what we're looking to hold. And jump into the next one. which is an update on ballot for comment. You can see finally there, that middle one, we got 100% on our reconciliation. Last TDG, we got the last ballot for comment issue resolved. That was the pregnancy status one. So we have, through the TDG, completed that now. We still have a few to apply, so you won't see all the changes physically in the Fire IG yet, but we're close. There's only about 4 left. So I had this slide to show, I think, in about November last year, where we had the last one, pregnancy status, get across the line, but it took us a little while to get that one there. So congratulations, everyone. We have completed ballot for comment, and our next step will be moving towards a ballot for working standard, which we're looking for to in August. Not a lot of time left for that, but it's great we've got through that ballot for comment. It was a really good exercise to get a lot of good feedback on the specification and where we're at. And that's meant we could move forward a lot of these changes we've done earlier this year. So now moving back into feature proposals, continuation from previous meetings. So we're looking at the communication request feature proposals. We have already been through copy 2. Copy 2 has now been applied to the Fire IG. I'll show you that in a moment so you can see what that looks like. And today we'll look at the other ones, which is urgent provider, patient, and communication request task. So just a little bit of context on this as well in light of the AU eRequesting data for interoperability. Basically, it had noted that distribution list and urgent contact have been included as clinically important concepts, but have not been explicitly represented in AU CDI, AU eRecDI, referring instead to the standardized reputation of health providers in Fire IGs. So just setting the scene there about what was said in the data for interoperability about distribution list and urgent contact, but basically gives us the room to move to implement it as per the standard Fire approaches. But I will jump into, we had discussed this a little bit already, but what we have implemented already is the copy 2 communication request. So that's over here on the right in this diagram, where we have a sender will be an AU core organization. We have the requester, which is an AU core practitioner role. The communication request is about either an imaging request or a pathology request. The subject is an AU core patient, and what we just discussed is the recipient can either be an AU core patient or practitioner role. And the actual profile is defined here, the AU eRequesting communication request copy 2. And it's a bit hard with all these obligations. Now we've got all our default obligations in here. It does pad the screens out a bit. But we've got in here, we've got the group identifier as part of that, which is our place of group number. We've got a status, which is a fixed value of active. We have the category coding, which is a fixed value of a notification. You're saying you cannot say do not perform. It doesn't make sense to say do not perform copy 2. And we've got the references to subject, about, requester, recipient, and sender, which I just walked you through. And then we have a reason code, which we've set up a value set, which we agreed to, and its type here is copy 2. So that gives you the ability to identify this communication request as a copy 2. Jumping back to our feature proposal, these were all put in one feature proposal that were sent out for review. Feedback, just put it in the chat. Everyone else can follow along. Like I said, we've done copy 2, so this was the proposal there. Now we're moving on to look at urgent provider. So A definition here of an urgent provider communication request is direct communication from a filler to a clinical provider for the purpose of providing urgent results. It's not a replacement for a formal report, but it is intended to provide a timely notification of critical results. The communication is sent to a specific provider and the medium is normally phone. So that's the description we've got there. So what we'll see here is a lot of the elements are the same as what we had for copy 2. So we've got the group identifier, which is the place of group number. We've got a status with a fixed value of active. The category coding here is different. So here it is an alert. On the copy 2, the coding was a notification. It's changed the category coding from notification to alert. There is a medium here, which is phone. And then we have the subject, which is a patient. The about, it's either a pathology request or an imaging request. We have when it was authored on. We have the requester, which is a practitioner role. We have the recipient, which is a practitioner role. And the sender is an organization. And then the reason code at the bottom is urgent. So to identify it as an urgent request. Do you have any comments or thoughts about that proposal? Tawinder?
Michael, the medium is always going to be phone, or it can be fax as well.
Yeah, I'm just so we do have that as a required pattern. Sorry, is Andy on the call? I'm trying to think whether that was, yeah, Andy's there. Andy, was that deliberate to restrict this to phone, or was it?
Yes, mainly because the concept of an urgent fax seems an oxymoron. I'm not too worried about that. It is, and we could.
This is where we need digital referrals.
We could loosen it. The other one is, are there, an urgent email? Do you want an urgent SMS? Like, there are a number of different options, or we could just not restrict medium.
Sadly, it's very common, like urgent fax. As much as we want to axe the fax, it's brutally common.
So next time someone mentions axe the fax, we say, no, we're standardizing the fax.
We're axing the fax through standards.
I might suggest that we should actually make an active point that fax are not urgent. Like, I've never heard as a clinician that there's something urgent I need to tell somebody through fax. So I'm happy to be challenged on that.
Always good to have clinical input, especially when it agrees with me.
Rosemary, do you have a view on this? Like, I feel like urgent fax is pretty common.
Sorry, just trying to unmute myself. Yeah, I agree with you. Urgent fax is very, very common and is often, because you can't catch people on the phone, is often the only way you can get through to them. And they, certainly will act on that. So, yes, it is very common. So I think that we shouldn't be restricting the media at all. Because
I was just going to say from a
every mode.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Megan? Yeah.
Sorry, Rosemary, continue.
No, that's fine, Megan. I had finished because, as I was trying to say, is that we try every mode of contacting the clinician when it is urgent.
Yeah, I was just going to say from hospital background, we heavily relied on, the big red bold fax being sent through for the admin staff to pick up in a clinical setting because the doctors or care team aren't available to take phone calls when they're with patients.
Yeah, exactly. Like unfortunately, it's a fast way. It's like, I guess it's like email, but for some reason we think it's we think email's insecure, but faxes aren't. But it's like a delayed. It's in your inbox urgently, you know, as opposed to no, we literally need to speak to you now. Stop doing what you're doing. Like.
My only issue with making it unrestricted, I'd rather have phone, which could be mobile phone or land phone, and fax, is if we do leave it unrestricted, then in theory, you can make a communication request for a medium that is not supported by the
but
the other
it's
party.
it's for the filler to determine. Like if you say, you know, by courier pigeon, we're going to go, well, we can't do that, but we'll call you, or like it's a request, not a order in a sense. Like if they fax and we can't fax, well, it basically we're saying it's urgent, get it to me. We'd prefer that you do it via phone, fax. But the lab now knows that you want it urgently, and if they can't get you by phone, they'll probably fax it to you. Like they'll.
Right, but that's another reason why we're kind of slapping a task onto this as well. So I do think that this is a request, so it is an order in theory, an order to communicate. And if you can't communicate using the designated medium of communication, like you could.
But that
like,
it wouldn't be a
restrict
it wouldn't be a failure if I can't do it by the designated order of communication, right? Like if you say urgent phone and I can't phone you, I fax it to you, I'm going to say, well, I completed what you wanted. It's not a strict rule; it's a preference.
Is it? This is a request with a spec, and
Well,
we're also limiting. I don't know whether the base communication is limited to one medium, so you can't give a set of choices of mediums. But if you look it up.
And then if we're unable to do that choice, but we could do something else, we're just going to neglect to do that because you didn't ask for that, so we're not going to do it. We're just now not going to get the result to you. We could have faxed it to you, but you didn't want us to do that, so we didn't.
Well, no,
I'm not sure if that's how it works.
But I don't think that necessarily is the interpretation of this. It's simply saying that they're requesting this communication in this way. If you can't do it, it's not saying you can't communicate in any other ways. It's simply saying this is what was requested. So, you know, it's going to get complicated to introduce alternative pathways and somehow overlay them into this request. Did you just look that up, Michael?
Yeah, I'm trying. I can't find that.
Can't find communication request?
Yeah, got it. Well, no, someone else quicker than me found it and throw it in the chat.
Yeah. Medium, 0 to many. You can have multiple communication channels. So, I guess the other thing about the communication request is it also is, in theory, providing you the information required for using that channel.
So yeah, 0 to many, and these are what's in the example list.
So we have constrained it to 1-to-1. So maybe, it's appropriate to make it 1 to many. And then you could say, like, here is the ways I know you can communicate with me: fax, mobile phone. You could be quite particular, or other mechanisms.
I'm only familiar. I've only ever seen urgent phone, urgent fax. I haven't seen urgent other things.
Yeah, on our request forms, that's what we have. Urgent phone, urgent fax, or page. We certainly have page.
Yeah.
We can't hear you, Vince, if you're talking. Didn't quite get that.
Yeah, I thought setting it'll be commonly
Pager to me.
Hey, so page. I think he's saying pager. Pager is still a thing.
Ah, good point.
It's not on the list, is it? Is pager there?
Can't say it on the list.
Text type written? No. Printed? No.
There has been an enhancement to this, I think in R5.
Just this is.
Right, so
Like, he's going to let me just change that. Yeah, tried to cheat it. 1 minute.
That in total feels almost too confusingly granular. We don't want to.
I mean, you
Do
can also
we-
make it. You can also make it 0 to many, and simply say that you could say, you know, this is a communication request, but I'm not going to tell you what the medium is you should use. And assuming you already know an appropriate way to contact me, there is that possibility, but that becomes less, reliable. I think one of the value adds that we have a possibility to add into this is actually the understanding of success or failure in this. So if you did ask for urgent communication, I tried, I couldn't get through, then that would let us at least kind of understand what happened, as opposed to kind of now where that is a bit of a black box.
This is the updated list from R5.
Page, isn't it?
Yeah, does page work? Can you actually get like the detailed result in a page, or is it just to tell you there is a result you need to?
I thought it was more like
check?
a ping. It was like,
Yeah.
call this number.
Page, you can configure messages to be sent, but there is a limit of a very small character.
Yeah, so you could only say result for Brian Smith is ready. Like you couldn't really tell him the
Or-
result.
Shouldn't send patient information over it either, but
Result
it's normally
is
just
negative.
urban. Yeah, or it's normally just urgent pathology result or something like that, from my experience. And then that would trigger you to go actually look at the result.
Which result? They give you a number, would they? Like,
Yeah, well, you integrating to a page for that would be quite complex.
I thought page usually worked like you would call someone back. It's like, please call, and then you call and go, what's up?
You can use page as a communication method, like we used to do it for a lot of code calls. And you like the character limit, I think is about 200. It's very, very small. So it needs to be quite succinct for you to action something.
I don't think there's any issue with there being a secondary communication after the first one, which is not within the scope of the initial communication. So I don't know, but as you say, I don't know if there's any direct code to do it. But I think the semantics of communication request is you're requesting with a particular one of a particular set. I don't think it's saying use all of them. I think it's saying use one of the mediums that is listed.
And I think page would also, you'd have to be within the network.
It's something. Yeah, maybe is it a hospital thing? In the last 2 decades, I can't have.
Hospitals are moving away from page as well because they usually have critical communications apps so that it's auditable.
I haven't come across it in the last 2 decades in private pathology. And it certainly used to happen.
Can I think that the questions here we have is, do we want to make this from one-to-one to one-to-many to allow multiple? And then the second question is, do we want to constrain the list or just leave it open for now?
Can I also, just as a friendly amendment, ask whether we should make it 0 to many? Whether you have to have a medium at all?
Mhm.
But should you have a coding text if you're going to do that? Like,
Well, that's
that a bad
saying,
thing?
please contact me. I'm still interested in knowing whether the contact was made. So I did ring up the front desk and I passed the information on. That was my urgent communication to you. You say I never saw it. Well, this is when it was done. So the task would still be relevant in that case. But just to say, I don't want to dictate which medium you should contact me on. I was trying to cover your use case where, you don't want to be prescriptive.
So, but don't we already have on service request the urgent flag? Are we sort of doubling down here? Like, have the concept of urgent, and then this was going above and beyond that, saying, phone me on this number. And if we then make this now not phone or fax, but sort of just communication, then how does that gel with the fact that it's urgent?
Well, I think I think we previously had this discussion about the urgency of doing the test versus the urgency of communicating
it,
of the result. So in theory, could you have a standard test, but I really want to know the result as soon as you get it?
Yeah, I'll show you also the definition from AU eRec. BI, so the urgent contact details, one or more designated contact people for urgent notifications. Details about each urgent contact include their name, organization. So because then this references the recipient. So you're specifying here the urgent communication details for this request. So this references the recipient, which is a practitioner, which would have those details in there about what those, and they might have multiple contact details in there. And if you're not prescriptive in saying phone me, and you should be able to use whatever's the most appropriate that you take out of that practitioner role details to contact them. It might be your normal channel, what number you use, or
I'd tell you about it. It is very different to just urgent flag for many reasons. So do we make it row 1? Can say phone, you can say fax, you can say nothing. It's just urgently communicate with me somehow.
Yeah, and then it's up, the recipient would have the details of the contact in it, as in they need to be contact details.
And there's a lot of truth in that. Like, there's a lot of, like, we have a whole lot of information on doctors, and we will numbers that we already have recorded to try and contact them.
Yeah, so how we are using, like, when that information on when they're raising an order, they do mentioning if it is an urgent request, how they should be contacted, and there are options for giving phone number and fax number, and sometimes they are passing the both, so the medium turns to be both in the request. And also the recipient in that case, the practitioner role, I think in this case, when we are passing the recipient, the contact information is must. So if you are giving the AU co-practitioner role, it doesn't have mandatory contact information. But if I'm creating an urgent request, it is important that I should pass that contact details as well. So the profile for the recipient should change with the contact being mandatory. That's a thought.
It's similar to, I'll just put the hands up.
Steph?
I completely agree. If the profile changes to somebody with a contact details as somebody who is making an urgent request, then by definition, we can restrict it to those contact details that are provided.
Steph?
I think, yeah, we've got a really good discussion going on there, but it seems like we're maybe ready to make a proposal. I'd like to motion, yeah, the discussions are over, for the communication request medium to be relaxed back to a cardinality of 0 to many. And recipient seems like we've already constrained cardinality 1-to-1.
Yeah, but we need, do we need another profile for practitioner role with the mandatory contact information?
I think we actually have to do that every time we have referenced an AU Corp profile. We need to go through and work out whether AU Core is appropriate or not, and we need to further constrain. I don't think this is an isolated situation here where we've referenced AU Core profiles in a number of places. And I think that's an exercise we actually need to do sort of as a holistically, because whether this is a specific practitioner profile just for communication request, or is a practitioner profile that's for a practitioner in a number of different uses in eRequesting. We probably should look at that holistically. And it's something it has come up a few times in a few different scenarios. So I think looking at, I'll just jump to, got too many windows open.
But I think the intent of what Tawinder was saying is that, for instance, if you're asking to be contacted via email, then you need to provide within the resource email contact information. So whether we could add invariants onto this without specializing the profile, but instead just have an invariant to say, if you have selected this medium, then this content must be included within the contact information.
Belinda?
Yeah, that's very valid what Andy said. And also the practitioner role has like AU practitioner role has mandatory practitioner information as well. But when I'm asking for a recipient only for the contact information, I might not need to give all of the practitioner information whom they want to contact back, or just a number that I just need to give it. So I'm not sure is that practitioner role is a valid recipient profile at that position, or some telecommunication information or communication information profile is just required at that stage. We don't need to pass a person information.
We had this problem with Gentis when we first went live, is that the communication was on the placing the order. When they said urgent, they could provide a phone number, but that phone number was for that order, right? It's not the practitioner's phone number. It's just the phone number for this order. He might change the number tomorrow to some other phone. And so you can't just reference the practitioner role, where that, like, it's, we in the end, we made it contained within the communication request, because it had to be an instance per order, not the greater practitioner role, right? Because he might use his wife's phone number today and his other mobile's phone number tomorrow. So when he makes the communication request and says, call me, he said on this number, he means for this request. Tomorrow might be a different number. And so we used a contained practitioner role in the communication request to express the number to call me on. Is kind of what I think Taylor Singh's getting to. And then that profile is a bit like, well, you got to give me the contact details. You can't say call me and not tell me how.
Yeah, so I think we're both Tawinder and Magentis did the same thing in that approach. However, I do wonder whether you could be more open if it is a reusable practitioner role that is, you know, you're fine with the normal contact details that's associated with that. And it seems that there's a second issue just to provide an assurance that depending what medium you're asking for, that the appropriate contact information is actually provided within it. It is, we've both discovered this, it is more technically challenging to support contained and uncontained references in general. So it's always easier to be quite specific, always make it contained or always make it not contained kind of thing. If you allow for either, there's a lot more work to be done in implementation.
True. It's interesting that contact point system has pager in it. Like I'm almost looking at communication requests and wishing that the code for medium, the value set used, should almost be the same value set as code point system, which has phone, fax, email, pager, URL, SMS, other. Because if they're not the same, then what does it mean to say, you know, the medium is this thing from one value set, and then the actual contact point is some different value set? I don't know whether
but the medium that's bound to a communication request is only the binding strength is example. So there really is.
Could you bind it to contact point system, like, and then they align at least?
I don't think what we want to do here is not technically solve it. We want to get the intent, because there's probably a few different ways we could technically do it. And also understand too that we don't have to get it perfect first time. So that this can be an iterative process where we've identified the need for an urgent communication request. We have a starting point for that profile, and then we can iteratively improve it over time. We can further constrain it over time. But we do need a starting point. I'm not sure that we're going to solve all these problems now today. Just wondering if there is enough here or a proposal that we could make today where we accept the starting point for urgent communication that we can then build on. And events like connectathons and things are perfect places where we can test some of these things out and bring them back to the TDG and say, hey, this isn't working. This is how we think it should work. We need to constrain this, unconstrain it, use a different value set, use invariants, those sorts of things, because it is going to be difficult to solve that in a TDG meeting. I think they are things we need to go away and bring proposals back about options for that. Interested if anyone thinks there is a position we could start with today. I know Steph did make a motion. I don't know whether we wanted to go further with that or change it. So I think Steph's motion was just to accept this with changing it from changing it to 0 to many. And that was the only change I think Steph had proposed. But happy to, if someone else wants to amend that, or
I would accept that as a starting point, Michael, and we can work from there, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. So Steph, did I correctly reiterated your motion, did I?
Yes, that's correct.
Yep. Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second to accept this one. Jamie? Yep.
Sorry, just a quick point of clarification. So we're saying we're not constraining it to any set values at this point, just 0 to many of either participation mode or whatever we decide is appropriate?
Yes, to my understanding.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
That's everyone's understanding. Okay. Well, I will.
Sorry, does that mean you'll remove the required then?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Are there any other questions before I do launch the poll? Okay. I'll launch poll for that motion. So that's to accept this proposal, with the changing from medium to 0 to many, and removing a required pattern. We've got a fair few votes now. I'll just end that in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll. So we have 20 affirmative, we have 0 negative, and we have 3 abstain. So that motion has passed.
I think there's lots more to do on the recipient reference and how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people have proposals they want to bring to the TDG, they're more than welcome to. So if you want to take what we've started with here and then say this is a proposal, absolutely bring them along. Reach out to a co-chair, get it on an agenda item, and bring it to a future meeting. Because yeah, we will absolutely further refine them as needed.
Is there a way to constrain a profile to say a reference must be contained?
Yes.
Awinda? Did you still have a question? Yeah.
Is that proposal was also for copies too, or just for this?
Yeah. So no. So that was we did copy to in a previous meeting. So that one's already been accepted. So.
Yeah. My only concern with the copies too is that the recipient can organization dissource information as well, not always a practitioner. So when we are doing copies too, we find sometimes GP systems are selecting an organization, not only the practitioner.
I mean, a copy to Brown Street Surgery as opposed to a doctor.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I'd suggest is I was going to go through this in the walkthrough at the end. We're probably going to run out of time today anyway. But one thing to suggest is all this stuff we're doing through the TDG, we're making decisions, we're moving forward, we're putting them into the IG. If you're looking at something like here where we've got copy to, this is something we've implemented. You think there's something missing, you think there's something wrong with this, you think there's something we could do better. On every page in the IG, there is down the bottom, a link down the bottom here, which is propose a change. So we want to encourage people to do this, to actually propose a change when you've found something in the IG, whether that's at a connectathon in your own work environment, whatever. If it doesn't work for you, if you can propose a change, this takes you into Jira. You can raise an issue on the spec, and then it goes into our backlog. So, and this is something not waiting until we get to ballot to raise all these issues. We actually want people to go through and identify issues that we've got now so that we can bring them up in meetings, go through them, try and address them. So anything when you're reviewing the spec going through, definitely go down here, propose a change, identify the changes on the current version. If you need help raising one of these changes, not quite sure how to do it, how to go about it, reach out to one of the co-chairs. We'll be more than happy to help you raise these issues. And we want those issues raised because then they're there, they're documented. We know exactly what issue you've identified, what effect it has on you and your system. And then we can provide that back to the TDG with proposals to try and resolve those issues. Okay. Now, the next one we had was the communication request for patient. So this is direct communication from a filler to the patient. This supports the use case where a diagnostic provider sends a communication to a patient to request that they book an appointment or provide instructions for a test. Sometimes the communication is not to be performed. For example, when a patient has requested they not be contacted by SMS. At the moment, the only medium supported are SMS and email. So this is, again, is a communication request profile. It's got the group identifier. It's got the active status. The category coding here is, I think there's a proposed value set for that. Let me have a look. So this is in a branch. You can actually have a look at these. When we put out the proposals, they were drafted in a branch, so you can actually click through them. So this is proposed value set. which had a reminder or an instruction. So that was on the category coding, so a reminder or an instruction. There's a do not perform flag here. So true when SMS and email communication with the patient is requested not to be performed, say not to contact the patient. And then we have the medium, which is SMS or email, which is another value set that posing as part of this. The about is to a diagnostic request. I think there's an error in that. That should be about the imaging request or pathology request. The requester is a practitioner role. Oh, actually, this looks a bit different. The requester is the patient, the practitioner role, or an organization. And the recipient is a patient.
Is the requester really a patient?
Yeah, I think that's not correct. I think it should be the same as the other ones, which is actually it's the requester is whoever created the diagnostic request.
No. This is
No?
creating the communication request. So, I mean, ultimately, a requester should be the patient. It's not up to the clinician to determine whether or not the patient decides to receive communications. If it was about communication with the practitioner, most certainly the requester would be the practitioner for that. But I don't think we should be expecting the practitioner is making the request. They're doing they're doing it on behalf of the patient. So ultimately, still a patient's request. Do not contact me.
Okay, that makes sense.
I just note with this one that I was going to say with this one, I think this is the first use of the do not perform that we've kind of talked about, and this does take it into consent territory. And then you get into the question of whether you should, provide both positive and negative communication requests, or what happens when you say nothing, and then what's the semantics of those different use cases.
So I'm getting a little confused here between the copy to patient request, as in send a copy of the reports to the patient, as opposed to don't SMS the patient about the request. Like the use case we first had with Magentis was when we get an order, we send an SMS to a patient to say, here's your pathology request, go wherever you like, right? Like it wasn't the result, it was the pathology request, so that they had a copy on their phone and they could take it to a collection center, right? That was the first use case that brought about this. And then we had the notion that some patients didn't want to be contacted by their SMS number. They do not want us to send the request to them, right? So this was to say, hey, don't send the request to the patient. But then that gets very murky, because you could also look at this and say, is this about sending a copy of the results to the patient, which is a very different, paradigm to sending the request to the patient, right? And I'm now very confused between the two. Like, is this servicing one and not the other, or is this trying to service both?
Just one.
The request one, the sending the request to the patient.
The other one should actually have an about of the report that doesn't exist. And yet in consent, you have an ability to talk about the derived, the related kind of data. So you could say the related data to a request, the children of this request, that's what this consent's about. Whereas we don't have that in the case of communication request. Window.
Yeah, I do have the same topic because we being Intelsat, we're not using this because, as Angus mentioned very nicely, that this is more as what we have seen. Fillers are more using it as a consent because they are not sending results back to the patient, but using it as whether they can contact the patient over the SMS that there is an order generated for you, or as a reminder. But is this appropriate to use communication request for this uses if they just need it as a consent in their system? My first question. And the second is on these communication requests. Fillers are obliged to update the status back to the order system that they have for all the communications that we are created copies to, and others one, when they are contacting, are they obliged back to update to the GP system that they have contacted? Is that information needs to come back? What's the obligation here?
Is this about the tracking of the communication? Was that the last
Yes.
question?
So
Yeah.
what exactly the purpose of having this communication is, if it is only being used as a consent? Because if the pillars are not sending the results to the patient, what's the purpose of this communication? And if it is only used as a consent, then why not the consent service? The second is for the copies to and others one, the last we have just seen, all the communication requests that we are generating. When the fillers are doing those communications, they are obliged to update the placer system that the communication has been completed. They need to update the status of the communication request saying completed.
I think that's undefined. We Sonic update them, but we're not updating them in the sense that we literally did it. We're just going, we've finished doing the request, right? So wrongly or rightly, we're updating our communication requests when we authorize the reports to say, and that's all done. And it's actually not true. Like, if we couldn't phone the doctor, like couldn't get through to them, we'd still say that communication request is completed. We're not saying it was done, just saying we've finished doing anything that we might do. But I don't think that even that's a strict rule. We could not update, right? Because we do not have an elaborate system today where we can message back that, yes, we phoned that result through to you and update the fire tasks to say we did.
We are also not obligating the task associated with the diagnostic request to say that you must fill in all of the task status updates. We've not said anything about mandatory status updates versus optional. You know, you could argue that the absolute mandatory one is the task must be requested, otherwise no behaviour could be expected at the instigation of a workflow. So at least when it was started out as requested, but what obligation do you want to place on subsequent statuses? But I think in the same way with the task associated with a communication request, it has to be requested at the start. So it's got to be in a requested state. However, you know, not all systems are going to be able to necessarily at this point share failure modes or success associated with it. You know, in Angus's case, it's in some ways probably better not to say anything at all rather than saying something that's false, as in I've success. It's fine saying, yes, I've received your communication request, which is probably always going to be true. But what may not be true is that you've completed it, because completed does imply successful completion. If it wasn't successfully completed, it should have failed. And it's probably better not to have saying anything unless you're sure about what that status is. Anyway, Barty.
Yeah, thank you. So in regards to copies to we do have something which is not very in-depth, but it always lists down all the practitioners, all the recipients who would want a copy of the results. And I haven't seen ever lab responding back to the hospital to communicate that yes, they have delivered all the results to the intended recipients. It's just more like a communication from the requester system that these all parties would like to have a copy of it. So I've never seen that loop closing of indicating that okay, the results are complete. Yes, the requesting party gets the copy of the results to complete the request loop, but never have heard of any such communication coming back saying, okay, all the recipients also have received a copy of each.
Yeah, we don't really have any technical way of doing that at the moment, so it's kind of not surprising. But likewise, we really don't have a technical way of representing the status changes in task fulfillment for a diagnostic request either. But in general, I think the requesting and workflow pattern is a healthy pattern to adopt between organizations that are asking for and receiving services that are completing. So I think it's a good pattern to adopt and allow for those who have potential to provide that have a pathway to do it. And I think, as others have pointed out, if there is no immediate mechanism to do that in your system, I am not in any way advocating that we should mandate that. It's just, I think what we can do is give direction to those who can provide that. And it is the foundation and the kind of the reinforcement of that common pattern, be it communication request, diagnostic request, medication request. It can all follow that same pattern.
Yeah,
future-proofs us to the ability to that happening in the future, but when by no means mandating it must happen up front.
That's actually the next proposal in here is about that request task.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of conversation about that, but back on this proposal for the need, first of all, identifying, is this communication request for a patient required? My take on it is that it's basically providing the patient's preferences for communication. And it says it here in the description where communication patient requests that they book an appointment or provide instructions for a test. And this would be their preferences. I prefer to be contacted by SMS or email or do not contact me. So it might be more than consent because you're also providing the preference of whether they want to be contacted by SMS or email.
Will these have tag? So how do I know the difference between requests to send them something about the pathology request and the copy to one? Is it like
we have the reason code? Here. We have the reason code here as the patient, and we have a reason code of urgent, and we have a reason code of copy to. So each of these communication requests has a reason code on it.
Okay, got it. Yep, okay.
Which distinguishes them for their purpose.
Great. Yep. Oh, that answers my question. Yep.
So does anyone think that's useful having this communication request and wants to make a proposal that we have it? Or is it something we need to shelve and maybe think about whether it's more of a consent?
Yeah, this requires GP system to be advanced enough to take that preferences from the patient and pass that in order, saying how, if the patient wants to be contacted and how, and then only this information can flow. Otherwise, if it is just the consent, then the patient, if the patient has that details, the lower system can pass that.
Yeah. So it is, it is optional. So if you don't have it, you don't create one of these patient communication requests. So it's only created when you have the information to provide.
No, that's what I'm asking. Like I do have the estimate, the contact information of the patient, but if GP system doesn't have the provision to take that sort of consent or preference from the patient, technically saying, do you want to be contacted? And in that case, they can generate or not generate. So
But
like if I don't have a checkbox or if I have if I have a checkbox, that would be more be as a consent than preference. So I'm not sure how to differentiate from the DP system perspective, whether this is a preference to the patient or it is a consent from the patient to be contacted.
You need to fix medical director, mate.
Oh,
say, if you haven't
gentle.
implemented, you haven't.
Oh, just 5 gentle. Yeah.
Can I just say, I think it's important to have this option, particularly for instructions. We were all talking about consent, but I think instructions, particularly in imaging or special tests. So I'd like to propose that that this go forward.
Thanks, James. So we have a motion. Did someone want to second that?
I'll second it because we're already doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any further communication or amendments anyone would like to make to the proposal to accept this patient communication request? No, we talked it all out. Like before, it's a starting point. So we can refine over time. There's no
Ross,
other
we use this today, and it's as simple as saying, don't send the SMS with the request to the patient when we receive the order. And to Tailwind's point, if you haven't implemented it, then we're just going to send them all the time. And if your patients don't like that, we're going to point back at you and say, tell us not to send them.
It's also a bit of a cheat because there are a lot more complex pathology workflows, especially things like if you've got local sample collection and you send a request, then obviously you don't want the lab contacting the patient about, collection instructions. Now, obviously, if you're clever, you would see that the request is actually a pathology request that is about a sample that already exists. So there's no point in sending instructions. But this is a bit of a blunt hammer to hit all sorts of things with, where you just don't want those SMSs about, the pre kind of the instructions about services being kind of sent to the patient.
Yeah, Andy, but my point more toward is, like, say, if we are not sending this information, does that clearly saying to the filler system, don't contact the patient?
No. If you don't send anything, then you're giving no instruction. So there is no guidance that the service provider is receiving about contacting the patient. So if you've included, SMS information or an email address for that patient, you haven't explicitly said anything. I think you raise a very valid point about the nature of this is a consent versus an instruction. And I think that is a valid point. I do feel, though, that there are broader use cases that we may not have necessarily played out yet that also could get value from the rest of the communication request building blocks that you wouldn't get, obviously, with consent. So you might end up having both. And I do agree that the current do not perform is a bit of a weird thing. You don't get that in many fire resources. But as Angus kind of said, we've got this kind of underway now. It works pretty well. And I think over the next few years, we might mature and have some alternative things we want to do, but it's a good starting point.
Just want to save filler system from some legal issues. They don't have the consent resource and they are contacting the patient. And patient don't know that they have given a consent to be contacted. This communication request doesn't imply that they have the consent to contact it.
So you're almost talking about an active consent needs to be sent for every request to say.
Just a thought. I'm not sure. Do we need that? Some system take it as, like, if TP system is sending that information digitally over to the filler, will that implied say, or as a contract saying that if we are sending that information digitally, filler systems are obliged to contact it and they are consented for it.
That sounds like a very interesting policy question that I think Jai and David Hickok would love to comment on.
I'd love to comment on it. Probably not now. I think it requires a little bit more analysis to see whether the consent is given on behalf of the patient by the clinician, whether that's included in the discussion that happens. That probably needs a little bit more unpacking.
Yeah, good point.
Are we going to Parliament, Andy?
You and me, Talwinder, we're going to set the universe afire.
Thank you.
All right, so I don't think we have any amendments. Great discussion, but I don't think we have any amendments. So I will launch the poll on the accepting of this proposal for patient communication requests. Okay, I'll just give it another 3, 2, 1, and I'll end that poll there. So we have 11 plus 1, so 12 affirmative. We have 1 negative and we have 8 abstain. So that motion has passed.
Sorry, Michael, that was a 1 plus 1 abstain for me.
Oh, sorry. Yes, correct. So it's 11 affirmative. It was 1 negative and 8 plus 1, so 9 abstain. Thanks, Steph. Okay, we're nearly out of time. We've got 10 minutes left, but there was one more in this block for communication request, which was what we just talked a lot about, actually. So this was about a communication request task for tracking the fulfillment of the communication request. So, for example, was a communication request attempted, successful, or failed? So this would be a task. I think, as Andy suggested, it would be set to requested by the placer, and then it's up to the filler how they track that the fulfillment of that communication request. Talwinder.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Andy and Michael, but I'm totally not in agree with this having tasks for the communication request. This feels like a bit of the overhead. For I know we trying to put a pattern over, but is that every time throughout the fire system, whenever we're going to have a request, it's a medication request or any other sort of request, we need to put a task over it to look for the status management. These requests already has the status inside it, and we don't need complete workflow. The reason we put task over service requests because there are multiple status or the steps through which a request will go, but service requests don't have all these to be fulfilled, all the status to manage those. In this case, it's just going to be active and then completed or failed, which can be managed through the status of the request itself. Do we need task resources over it? Just a thought.
Andy, Angus.
I want to hear Andy's response.
I guess a few things. The status of requests is actually quite a different thing. It's a communication request. Yes, you can have an active communication request and a revoked communication request. You could have an entered an error communication request, but those aren't about whether the communication request was ever done. They're actually about the nature of
completed.
Completed's the only one that is the beginning and the end agree, but the other statuses don't match up, so they're quite a different beast. I agree it is overhead, but the challenge with it is that without this, we fall back to solely a technical acknowledgement, and that's really the only basis of validation. And I think one of the things we're trying to grow in the work we do in Fire is putting in place the building blocks for collaborative care. And I do think that workflow is a foundation of collaborative care and the transparency of those workflows, so you can have trust and transparency of fulfillment. So if I ask a lab to send the results to someone else and they can't do it, it's just going to fall away and no one will know. Otherwise, because you have no way of communicating it. This actually gives a way of representing such success or failure that otherwise would be unavailable. So that to me is why, I mean, I think any kind you have a request, you have a desire for some transparency. Now, you could say there are situations where it's a fire and forget, tell you to do something and then I don't care what happens. But I think that is less of the situations rather than more of them. And certainly if we look back, you know, the world we come from is more that fire and forget model. But I don't think that's where we're going with Fire. So for me, the companion kind of request workflow thing is quite an important foundation to use. So it's kind of my argument for it.
But point here is, Andy, who is going to keep an eye on whether that fulfillment has happened over these communications? It's we being a practice or a placer sending this order out, and then it's all sitting with the filler to send to the copies to, and practice system is not getting notified for any of the action that been happened. So even in future, let's say if they can update back send us like update that they have completed the communication, won't that information be done through these communication request resources only? Like they can update the status back saying this is done versus
if it was available, then you know we would look to enhance the clinical ordering experience by going, you know, you selected a bunch of copy twos. If it's all good, then we won't show anything. But if there is a failure for one of the communications, then we'd somehow put in the UI that noting that there was a missed copy two, there was a failure on communication. You asked to send it to their oncologist. We couldn't send it. There was a failure. I agree it's not there today, but you know, to me, this is our whole job, is to make more transparency and openness in collaborative care delivery. And yeah, the same thing with patients and the involvement of patients. I don't think we can just pretend if you ask for something, it's always going to happen, because it doesn't always. I'm hopefully that Jana is going to back me up.
Yes, I am, and I'm going to propose the motion that we accept this.
I know what is backing me.
I'm kind of, I've struggled with this too, Tailwinder, and I don't think it's a reasonable item to say this isn't done today. It's not done today because there's no way to do it today, right? This, you know, us communicating back, not just that your service request has been done, but that we did call that doctor and we did send a copy to this doctor, or we failed to do that, I think has value. And to say that we don't do it today, it's like, well, it's chicken and the egg, right? Like if there was no way to do it in the past, so no one did it because you couldn't. This lays down the future where you could, whilst also not insisting that people now must, right? You can just acknowledge you got the task and never complete it, right? And you don't know. You can say it's in progress, but don't complete it. But it is, I agree too, as an implementer, someone has to write the code. It's a whole lot of extra infrastructure stuff around getting the order. Now I'm not just tracking like the progress of the order, I'm tracking the progress of the communication request, of which there is now like 4 or 3 of them. And it is more work. I'm more on the side of like accepting it now because I've already done it. I've written the code. Like every service request in my system has a list of what I call support tasks, which is communication, all these communication requests, right? And they're all typed. Like and I have the ability to treat them independently, even though today we really don't. We just treat them all in lockstep with the service request. But I do appreciate, like Andy was saying, that this lays the pavement for the next wave of people who start using this stuff, right? So Medical Director 2.0 or 3.0, whatever it's up to, once this is flowing, has been around for some time, they can, you know, people can, the railway's laid to provide more granularity about these things. You don't have to do it today, but at least the tracks are there for the future.
Yeah, I understand. My point only is that I understand from what you and Andy is saying that if we want to keep the tracks, there's a task resource for everything. Just look into one resource and see what all action you are expecting from a placer perspective. I don't have to look into different type of resources, but if the task resource is generated in my system, I can have that as in one place to look for what all tasks has been
Sorry,
answered back.
just noting the time, we've only got 2 minutes left. So we did have a
Yeah.
motion from Jamie. We did have a second from Rosemary in the chat. So we are in a position to go to a vote on this. Just was there any other discussion about any amendment or anything to this proposal before we do go to that vote? No. I will just launch the vote then, given we do have a motion and a second. Team should see a vote now for this proposal. Okay, we'll just give it another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we have 9 plus 1, so 10 affirmative. We have 2 negative, and we have 9 abstain. So that motion has passed. And that does lead us to the end of the meeting. So we didn't get to do our IG walkthrough, but just give me a second, get to the right screen. So we didn't get to a task business status proposal. So we'll roll that over to another meeting. Then I was going to do a fire IG walkthrough. Obviously don't have time to that. We did a little bit, just noting that a lot of the changes that we have now are in the IG. So you should go have a look, see what's there, provide any feedback as we've implemented. There's still more changes going through. Not everything's in there yet. Continuing to iterate every week, but check back in if you haven't been in there for a while, because there are a lot of new things from decisions we've made this year now in there. Just looking at the next meeting, like I said, our next meeting is actually next Tuesday, so really quick turnaround on that one at a different time on Tuesday, 3:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. I did provide the link earlier in the chat for that. It's a Teams meeting, not a Zoom call, so that is a bit different to normal. And then we're back. We've got the Connectathon, and then back into our regular scheduled TDG meetings coming back on Thursday, 27th of March. So thank you everyone for coming today. There was a lot of great discussion there. It was really informative. So thank you. And we'll see you next time. Some of you in Sydney.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Think so.